Our reading from the Gospel this morning is from the Gospel of John. It is part of the story of Jesus going to see Mary and Martha after word has been sent that Lazarus, their brother, has died. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loves him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this one from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him, let him go." Remembering is something that all of us experience. I'm not sure if we are prone to remember good things the most or bad things the most. In our reading from Isaiah today, Isaiah the prophet speaks of the things that were bad in his life and the life of Israel. The city was in ruins. There was rubbish all around. It was as if God had left the place desolate. And he lifted up that prayer at the beginning of our reading, reminding himself and reminding God of the sorrow, the sadness in his life. We too remember sadness and sorrow. Today we celebrate, if you will, in the midst of sadness and sorrow, as we remember these ones who we loved so much. We love so much, who have passed from this life to the future life already present with Christ and all the saints. And we remember all those good things, those little things that we laugh about, all those jokes that they played on us, all the times that they gave us help and supported us when perhaps we didn't deserve it. And the prophet Isaiah remembers that too, as he says, "God, you have been so good to us. You've cared for the poor and the aliens and the weak and the land. All of them, you cared for them. When the sun was shining, you were their shade. When the rain was falling from the sky in the winter, you were their shelter." Isaiah moves on. And he starts talking about that thing that First Christian Church is the best at. I don't know if every church can tell you what they are best at, but First Christian Church is best at eating. And if we're best at eating, we probably are best at cooking too. Amen, I heard that one. See, Nelson, you aren't the only guy. But eating and feeding and feasting are part of remembrance. You remember those meals that were wonderful? You remember those meals that something went wrong at? If you're like me, you might remember those meals where Brussels sprouts were served, and you had to eat something off the plate before you could leave the table, and everybody else left the table at 6:30, and 7:30 came around, and little Johnny was still sitting in his corner at the table, and by 8:30 he'd finally given up and had tasted that broccoli. Happy memories. But we also remember the feasts. We remember the Christmases and the Thanksgiving and the birthdays and the cakes and the pies and all the wonderful things. And okay, sounds like I'm only talking about mothers, but I know some of you had dads that cooked too. I didn't get anything from that. I worked on that line so hard. The feasts that we serve here at First Christian Church when there is a service of celebration is the best thing we do, because it takes care of the need for food and it offers the family and friends an opportunity to sit around tables and share. And before you know it, there's laughter. And before you know it, people are full of life and vibrant, when just a moment ago there was this somberness. But food and fellowship lift us up and remind us of those good things, those great things. And Isaiah writes about a feast that's going to come, a feast where there's going to be wonderful food and where there's going to be the best wine. And it's going to be a real feast on the mountain. And that feast, my friends, is the same feast we come to week after week at this church. When the time comes today for us to gather at Christ's table, if I step out here in the middle and say, we're going to skip that today, I'd be in trouble. Because we come anticipating this feast. Just as we anticipate that great feast that will come. Luke and Matthew tell us that Jesus said at that table that I will never again eat this feast with you until that day when God's reign is fulfilled. When God's reign is fulfilled. Can you imagine the lion lying down with the wolf? Can you imagine peace on earth? Can you imagine no more war when that day comes, and Jesus promises it is going to come? When that day comes, not only will we eat this feast of bread and wine with Jesus, but we will also eat it with our loved ones who have preceded us to this great feast, this great meal of the best wine and the most delicious of food. This table of the Lord is someplace we come every week in our tradition, not because we have to, but because we need to. We need to come and be quiet for a few minutes, to take the bread and the cup and to be reminded of Jesus, to be reminded of the nonviolent approach that he took to his death, the submission that he gave when he could have called 10,000 of angels. We are reminded that we take this into our life so that we can take it into the world. And then the feast spreads, and the feast grows until the feast brings about that day when we will again be served and joined by Christ in this meal. We're going to begin our remembrance time in just a moment. Our Healing Hearts ministry, they're all wearing yellow this morning, lead us in this time of remembrance. Many of you have sat in the front. We thank you for that. It will make your trip to light your candle a little more easy. In a moment, Linda Blair is going to come up and she will be reading off names, and a candle will be lit, and then a bell will toll. So when your name is called, if you're going to light a candle, please come up. One of the Healing Hearts will have a candle, and we'll have the other candle picked up, and you will light that candle, and it will be placed back on the table. And this will get me in trouble, but I'll say it anyway. You may take your candle with you at the end of this service, if you wish to. This is a special time. It's both a time that is poignant and a time that is promising. Let us celebrate together.